For years, the truth stayed buried. Now, King Charles has finally let it surface. What he revealed about Meghan's past wasn't emotional. It was calculated, documented, and devastating. This wasn't gossip or rumor. This was the moment silence ended, and the monarchy decided it had waited long enough. The silent strike. King Charles ends the waiting game. King Charles III had watched in silence. For more than 18 months, he held back, staying measured while his son and daughter-in-law launched interviews, Netflix specials, podcasts, each more damaging than the last. The world wondered why the king said nothing. Now we know. He was waiting for the right moment to act, and he did, with surgical precision. Following news of his cancer improvement, Charles made a quiet but devastating move. He allowed Parliament to proceed with something so rare, so severe, it hadn't happened in over 300 years. A vote to exile members of the royal family. His fingerprints weren't on the papers, but the plan had his quiet blessing. Inside the palace, private letters to Prince Harry told the full story, some of which were leaked just before the vote. In them, Charles warned, "Stop the attacks or face permanent consequences." The tone was firm, even fatherly. But when those letters were ignored, he made a choice. "A king doesn't shout, he signs," a senior palace aide said. This wasn't personal. It was constitutional. Charles didn't want confrontation. He wanted clarity. And now, there would be no more questions about Harry and Meghan's future in the UK. But if the king's silence was power, Parliament's voice was thunder. The Parliament bombshell that changed everything. December 3rd, 11:43 a.m. The moment that changed the monarchy forever. In a vote rarely seen in British history, 347 MPs backed the formal exile of Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. Only 216 voted against. The result stunned the chamber. Not a cheer, not a groan, just silence. Reporters outside began shouting into phones. News broke globally in under 90 seconds. But few outside Westminster knew how quickly, and secretly, this had all unfolded. The motion had only been introduced 6 days earlier, debated behind closed doors for just 72 hours, then brought to the floor with no advance notice to the public. That speed alone shocked constitutional experts. Exile decisions typically take months, sometimes years. This one moved like a guillotine. And the law? A nearly forgotten statute from 1703, giving Parliament the power to banish any British subject deemed a threat to national stability. The fact that it was invoked against the king's own son? Unthinkable. Until now. This wasn't revenge, said one MP. It was self-preservation. The monarchy cannot survive with a traitor in the family. The country didn't just exile Harry and Meghan. It erased any illusion that they still had a place at the royal table. And the real shock? This vote wasn't the beginning. It was the final chapter of a plan that started long ago, behind closed doors. Behind closed doors, the secret intelligence that sparked it all. It all started with a meeting no one saw coming. In early November, a classified briefing was held inside the Cabinet Office, tucked away from the cameras and headlines. A small group of senior MPs, intelligence officials, and constitutional experts were quietly summoned. The meeting was marked on public logs as a security review, but what was shared inside shocked even the most seasoned politicians. For the past 8 months, British intelligence had been tracking a disturbing pattern. A trail of PR contracts, media leaks, and coordinated messaging pointed to something far more dangerous than public complaints or criticism. This wasn't just about personal grievances. It was described as a deliberate attempt to destabilize the crown from abroad. Several pieces of evidence highlighted communications between Sussex-affiliated representatives and foreign media producers, some known for their anti-monarchist leanings. Others showed clear targeting of Princess Catherine in media coverage allegedly seeded by outside firms. The report was brutal. "This wasn't gossip," one MP said later. "It was a national security file." The most alarming phrase? Constitutional interference from foreign-aligned nationals. Harry and Meghan weren't just ex-royals. They were now being discussed in the same room as potential threats to institutional stability. The briefing concluded with a chilling question. Can the monarchy survive if its own blood is working against it? For a system already reeling from scandals, health scares, and public distrust, this was the final straw. But even with damning intelligence, Parliament wouldn't act without one more piece, a sign from the monarchy itself. And that signal came, not from Charles, but from the one man who knew Harry better than anyone, William's invisible hand, the brother who gave the signal. Prince William never stepped foot into the Cabinet Office. He didn't write to Parliament, he didn't hold meetings, but make no mistake, his hand was all over this. The heir to the throne kept a strategic distance. Instead, it was his private secretary who delivered a set of briefings to key members of both major political parties. The message was clear. The palace would not stand in the way if Parliament moved forward. The monarchy, for the first time in centuries, was giving silent permission for political action against its own. "He didn't ask for exile," said one parliamentary insider, "but he made it very clear he wouldn't stop it." Privately, William had made his position known to palace staff. He viewed his brother not as family anymore, but as a destabilizing force. Someone who had crossed every boundary of privacy, loyalty, and respect. Someone who had to be cut off, not out of hatred, but out of duty. And for those close to William, the final turning point came after Meghan's alleged plans for another anti-royal media campaign emerged. William reportedly told aides, "If we wait any longer, he'll tear it all down." Internally, the palace began referring to Harry as the constitutional risk. The same label once reserved for foreign agitators was now being used for the king's son. The emotional cost was heavy. William and Harry had survived their mother's death together, shared years of grief, walked side by side at Diana's funeral. But now one of them had crossed a line. "This isn't personal anymore," William allegedly told a friend. "This is the crown, and the crown must survive." With Charles silent and William refusing to intervene, Parliament had its answer. What followed wasn't just legal action. It was a total dismantling of the Sussex's royal future. Meghan's media web. The evidence Charles couldn't ignore. By late November, the whispers inside Whitehall had grown too loud to ignore. Intelligence briefings, quietly circulated between the Cabinet Office and senior parliamentary figures, revealed a deeply disturbing pattern. Meghan's name was never written in bold, but it didn't need to be. The trail pointed unmistakably toward her world. At the center of it all were PR firms. Not just any firms, ones hired in connection with Sussex-related media projects. These same firms had quietly funneled content into foreign outlets that had long criticized the monarchy. Headlines appeared to align with royal milestones. Sharp commentary against Princess Catherine surfaced just as she disappeared from public view due to illness. Leaks flared during the Queen's funeral. Entire narratives dropped hours before King Charles's coronation. It no longer looked like coincidence. It looked like a campaign. The briefings also referenced communications tied to a new documentary project. Though still in early development, insiders warned it could erode public trust in the monarchy if released. This was no simple docuseries. It was described in closed-door discussions as a constitutional threat. The project aimed not just to revisit past grievances, but to unravel the very foundation of the institution, its traditions, its history, its future. At first, King Charles had tried to show restraint, but now it wasn't about emotion, it was about survival. The crown had withstood wars, abdications, even betrayal. But it had never faced such a relentless attack from within its own bloodline, amplified through global platforms, backed by powerful connections, and shielded by distance. One advisor said it plainly. They weren't trying to leave the monarchy. They were trying to redefine it from the outside. For Parliament, that was the tipping point. For Charles, it was the green light. Meghan's media web wasn't just damaging, it was dangerous. And now it had consequences. The California collapse when Meghan got the news. The sun had barely risen over Montecito when the world turned upside down. Meghan was scrolling her phone over coffee when the news alert appeared. No warning, no leaks. Just one brutal headline: Parliament votes to exile Harry and Meghan from the UK. She stared at the screen for a few long seconds, then handed the phone to Harry. Neither of them spoke. Back in London, the vote had already passed. It was official. Irreversible. By the time their team made its first frantic calls to legal counsel, it was already done. The documents were signed. The exile was law. That same afternoon, a formal packet was delivered to their legal representatives. It detailed everything. Harry and Meghan were now banned from setting foot in the United Kingdom for at least 10 years. Frogmore Cottage, their last official property, had been seized by the Crown Estate. Their remaining ceremonial titles were revoked. British security cooperation was cut off immediately. And in a shocking twist, even their children, Archie and Lilibet, would need to petition Parliament as adults to re-enter the country. For Meghan, it was more than a PR crisis. It was personal collapse. The brand she'd built, the outsider who challenged the monarchy and survived, now looked like a fallen rebellion. Not a rebel queen, just an exile. Sources close to the couple described the mood in the house as stunned, not angry, not even desperate, just disbelief. They had known the vote was being whispered about, but they never truly believed Britain would go through with it. They believed, even until the night before, that King Charles would intervene. That family would override politics. They were wrong. Harry, who once stood on palace balconies in uniform, who saluted his grandmother's coffin in full dress, now found himself cut off from the very country he was born to serve. Not rejected by tabloids, rejected by law. They always thought the door would stay open, one royal source said. But you can only burn a bridge so many times before it's ash. And in that Montecito kitchen, on that quiet California morning, they finally understood. It was over. The vote that shocked the world. Why it happened so fast. The speed was brutal. The precision, surgical. By the time the public even knew a vote was being considered, it was already over. In the world of British politics, legislation moves slowly. Debates stretch for weeks. Public consultation, party infighting, endless commentary from experts. It's all part of the process. But not this time. The exile motion against Harry and Meghan passed in just 6 days. Introduced behind closed doors, debated in secret, then rushed to a final vote without warning. Even some members of Parliament admitted they didn't see it coming. But that was the point. It was designed to strike before resistance could form. Leaks were the greatest threat. If the press caught wind of the plan, it would trigger a media firestorm. Public pressure would mount. Political allies would retreat. And Harry and Meghan would do what they've always done, get ahead of the story. So the plan was kept airtight. The list of MPs involved was limited. The legal team worked off an obscure statute from 1703, dusted off from the archives. It had been used once, over 3 centuries ago, to exile a nobleman suspected of threatening national stability. It had never been used against a royal, until now. One senior official put it bluntly, "It wasn't cruelty. It was control. If we didn't act now, we'd lose the narrative forever." The final vote took place on December 3rd at exactly 11:43 a.m. The Speaker of the House read the result in a voice that reportedly trembled. 347 votes in favor, 216 against. Exile passed. In the chamber, there was no celebration, no applause, just stunned silence. A chill settled in the room as MPs absorbed what they had just done. Some stared straight ahead. Others looked down at their notes. Outside, reporters scrambled. In seconds, the news exploded worldwide. And in the palace? Stillness. There were no emergency meetings, no royal statements, no photo ops or briefings. It was as if the entire royal family had vanished. But that too was calculated, because they had vanished, strategically. Every senior royal had been moved out of London. King Charles was in Scotland, William at Windsor, Princess Anne in Edinburgh. Their absence meant one thing: plausible deniability. No one could accuse the family of influencing Parliament. But the truth was clear. The vote didn't happen without their blessing. The royal family didn't protest, because they didn't want to. They needed this chapter closed. Quickly, quietly, permanently. The Royal Cold Front. 29 words of goodbye. At 2:30 p.m. on the same day the vote passed, Buckingham Palace issued a statement. It was short, so short it could fit in a single sentence. Just 29 words. The matter decided by Parliament today is a constitutional question outside the scope of royal commentary. The family's focus remains on duty and service to the nation. No names, no apology, no emotion. To the public, it sounded like indifference. But to those watching closely, it was worse. It was a full disownment. The monarchy didn't just let the vote happen, it washed its hands of it. And still, no one returned to London. Not Charles, not William, not Anne. All of them continued with their planned schedules as if nothing historic had just occurred. Charles, in Balmoral, toured a community garden. William reviewed briefings at Windsor. Anne attended an equestrian event in Scotland. But inside the palace, staff described the atmosphere as strange, calm, almost too calm. Phones didn't ring. Senior aides didn't scramble. Everyone already knew. Everyone had been prepared. One insider described it as relief disguised as routine, because now the palace no longer had to answer for Harry and Meghan. The chaos was no longer their problem. The exile had moved everything from personal pain to constitutional fact. Still, questions hung in the air. Did Charles feel guilt? Did William hesitate? Had Anne, ever the loyal enforcer, spoken up in private? There were no public answers, but behind the scenes, small moments leaked. That evening, Charles was spotted alone at a window in Balmoral, staring out at the hills as the light faded. Staff said he stood that way for nearly 20 minutes. No one approached. One aide whispered, He looked like a man who'd made peace with heartbreak. At Windsor, William's reaction was colder. When told the final vote count, he reportedly nodded once and returned to his briefing. But later that night, in a private conversation overheard by a staff member, he was heard saying, "I didn't want it to come to this, but he left us no choice." And Anne? As always, her response was blunt. When asked by an assistant how she felt, she replied, "Institutions endure by making hard choices. Today was one of them." She said nothing more. No one in the royal family mentioned Harry by name. Not once. Not in public. Not in private correspondence. As far as the monarchy was concerned, he was no longer part of the equation. The 29-word statement said everything. It wasn't just exile, it was erasure. The warnings, they ignored. The final off-ramp rejected. Before Parliament struck, before the vote passed, before the headlines went global, there was one last chance. A final off-ramp. In late November, a trusted intermediary reached out to Harry and Meghan. This wasn't a formal negotiation, it wasn't a threat. It was a quiet message, passed through someone both sides knew and trusted. The request was simple: stop. Halt the attacks. Make a public commitment to remain silent on royal matters. Offer Parliament a reason not to act. For a brief moment, it looked like they might take it. Harry asked questions. Meghan considered the wording, but then the response came through their PR team. It was firm, defiant. They would not be silenced. They would not back down. They would not apologize. The intermediary relayed their decision back to the palace and Parliament. Then he reportedly said just 5 words. They have no idea what's coming. And they didn't. This wasn't their first warning. Weeks earlier, in early November, the Home Office had issued a formal request for clarification on Harry's UK residency status, security arrangements, and ongoing lawsuits. The letter was cold and bureaucratic, but the meaning was clear. The government was preparing something. The review wasn't routine, but Harry dismissed it. He told lawyers to push back. Meghan, according to sources, encouraged a hardline approach. They believed it was another power play, not a real threat. They misread the moment. Even William had offered a subtle warning. In an interview with a senior political correspondent, he had said, "There comes a point when protecting the institution requires the difficult decisions past generations avoided." He didn't name names, but anyone paying attention understood who he meant. But in California, the couple brushed it off. Meghan reportedly called William's comment performance theater. Harry saw it as a personal jab, not a political cue. They underestimated the seriousness of what was brewing in Westminster. They didn't see the machinery moving. They believed, to the very end, that the monarchy wouldn't dare. That belief collapsed at 11:43 a.m. on December 3rd. They thought they still had leverage, said one former palace aide. But what they had was illusion, and illusions don't survive votes. And now, the final curtain falls, not just on a family feud, but on the future of 2 very different legacies. The fallout, what this means for the future of the monarchy. It's over. The exile isn't just symbolic. It's legal, it's global, and its impact is permanent. Prince Harry is now flagged in international border systems. Though his British passport remains technically valid, any attempt to enter the United Kingdom will trigger immediate detention and removal. He is no longer a functioning royal. He is a restricted person. His presence in Britain is classified as a constitutional risk. Meghan Markle, once the voice of royal disruption, now faces a very different challenge. Her media value has dropped sharply. Brands that once lined up for partnerships are reconsidering. Why? Because exile doesn't sell. She's no longer the royal insider who broke free. She's the ex-royal who got shut out. Their children, Archie and Lilibet, are British citizens by birth. But under the current ruling, they will not be allowed to enter the UK until they are legal adults and can petition Parliament themselves. That process, officials say, could take years and may not even succeed. Behind palace walls, the atmosphere is eerily calm. King Charles has moved on. His focus is on succession, on legacy, on tightening the institution for the next generation. William is now the undisputed heir, with no sibling complications shadowing his future. The monarchy has protected itself, but at a cost. One royal insider said it best: "The crown survived, but it lost something to do it." Internationally, the backlash has been loud. American media outlets sympathetic to the Sussexes call the exile cruel, outdated, medieval. The New York Times published a headline calling it "The Day Britain Became a Monarchy Without Mercy." Others praised the firmness, a monarchy finally drawing the line. But the deeper question remains: was this exile justice or self-preservation? In Montecito, the Sussexes now face an uncertain future. Their platform was built on being royal disruptors, but now that royal tie is gone. No access, no property, no return. Only the stories remain. They'll try to reinvent, one former Netflix executive said, but without that connection, the spotlight fades. And for Britain, the monarchy has emerged from its greatest modern crisis intact. It chose survival over sentiment, order over chaos. But it also set a precedent that will echo for generations. Because now everyone knows even blood doesn't protect you if you threaten the crown. So now the truth is out, and nothing looks the same. King Charles didn't just reveal the past, he closed the door on it. For Meghan, the fallout is permanent. For the monarchy, it was survival. One revelation changed everything. And once the truth is spoken, it can never be taken back.